all these question marks coming into Thursday night. Who's going to be playing football for the Buccaneers?
Right here.
If you want to join an awesome community, talk fantasy football, get advice, all of that, and win a championship, make sure you hit that subscribe, hit that bell, so you get notified anytime we drop new content, which is basically daily. So let's get you to that matchup. Let's win you this week.
And so, Johnny, without further ado, let's hop into that Thursday night matchup. We've got the Chicago Bears hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, short week, Thursday night. It's a 44.5-point over-under, with Tampa Bay favored by 5.5. Johnny, when we look at the Tampa Bay side of the ball, I mean, they had to come off of a pretty big comeback win last week over the Chargers in order to come back. Tom Brady had a monster game, but he's going to face a really tough test this week in the Chicago defense. And not only that, got some banged-up weapons on this short week throughout the passing core. I mean, O.J. Howard down with a Achilles for the rest of the year. We've got Godwin nursing injuries, Scotty Miller, and now even Mike Evans, who's held out of practice. And then we've got the backfield dilemma, Johnny. So all these question marks coming into Thursday night. Who's going to be playing football for the Buccaneers?
Maybe me and you. I don't know. They might be holding tryouts. I don't know, Big Travie. I would rather be doing this and talking about fantasy football though, than actually playing it. But I will say, on the Tampa Bay side, right? Like, Tom Brady could look like a nice streamer to a lot of people. You know, had the mega week last week, 5 tutties, looked nice, right? But I would say let somebody else use that. Let them pick up that bomb. Let them get that, you know, Thursday thirst, as we like to say around here, and throw them in their lineup, because Chicago gives up the second fewest points to opposing quarterbacks, and they're just giving up 11.6 fantasy points per game. So I would stay away from Tom Brady this week if I could. But then, yeah, you're talking about this backfield. Man, it is brutal, just as brutal as the wide receiver core here, Travis. Ronald Jones should get the bulk of the carries once more. However, I mean, he had a solid week last week, and it was mostly because he got the volume. Now he should get the volume again this week, but Uncle Lenny is nursing an ankle injury. He is a game time decision, Travis. So I don't know if I'm necessarily rolling either one of these guys out if I have. You know, if they're both healthy, I think I would try not to get these guys in my lineup, because Chicago is giving up the fourth. They're the fourth best against the run, and giving up an average of 19.6 fantasy points per game to running back. So I think if it's you may be in a situation though where you've got to play them, right? You've got to be a situation. Yeah. Maybe you have Austin Eckler, or you have Nick Chubb, or you have Christian McCaffrey, and you're sitting here going, man, do I want to have to start Ronald Jones? And the answer is you probably have to roll him out there if you've got him. If you can avoid it, though, I like what you're saying here. The matchup's not great. Do want to bring up Keyshawn Vaughn a little bit, Johnny, because Keyshawn Vaughn was somebody that got involved late in that game and actually did score a touchdown. Do you see something? This was a post-draft darling of a lot of the fantasy beat writers. Do you see some sort of emergence for Keyshawn Vaughn this year? Lashawn Mccoy out with the ankle injury. Right, that's right. So Lashawn McCoy, he is done. I'm not exactly. It's not for the season.
It's an ankle sprain. I don't believe it's for the season, but definitely for some extended time.
I think by the time he is healthy, it's probably going to be for the season, because I think that Keyshawn Vaughn. Bones. Yeah, right. Well, what did we learn last week? Well, we learned that Ronald Jones, as much as you hit the jugs, man, you can't catch. You can't catch. So it's looking like Keyshawn Vaughn should take that role for that LaShawn McCoy had. And if Uncle Lenny is out, then I like that as like a dart throw if you have that thirst and need a guy to throw in, you know, as a high upside. I think Keyshawn could see an uptick in targets because he'll get the receiving work. And
not to mention just the receiving work that's vacated by McCoy, but also in that passing core, right? We've got some injuries throughout there. We talked a little bit at the top. So why don't you just break that down for me here, how you see that passing core working out? I mean, I don't want to have you predict who you think's going to play here, but it looks like Mike Evans should be able to go, and then maybe Scotty Miller would be the next guy on the list. How do you see that core we're breaking out?
Big Travis, you have the magic 8-ball over there, don't you? Why don't we just shake that thing for each one of these guys and see what it says? Because it's probably going to be pretty pretty much more accurate than what I might say here. But listen, Chicago giving up they're the seventh best defense against the pass. So even if Mike Evans goes out there, I want fantasy people who roster him to just temper your expectations. He's a beast, so you're gonna put him out there. But like I said, Chicago giving up an average of 16.9 fantasy points to the wide receivers. So it doesn't. If I'm having to roll somebody else out there out of this game, it would be Scotty Miller. You like what you saw. He did play only 53% of the snaps. He did lose a little bit to Justin Watson, who also came in last week and saw 6 targets, and they like him a little bit more on 2 wide receiver sets. Justin Watson. But it's clear that Scottie Miller is like a little bit better than him, and he's a little bit more of an apple in Tom Brady's eye. So I don't mind Scottie Miller as a wide receiver 3 flex option if one of your guys is on a bye.
Both Scotty Miller and Justin Watson held out of practice on Tuesday with their own ailing injuries. It's turning into the Philadelphia Eagles pretty quick over there. Really quickly on Gronk, Johnny, do you see any position here with O.J. Howard now done for the year where you'd be comfortable firing up Gronk this week?
You would think, right? Maybe Gronk could get a chance now. However, Chicago giving up only 8.7 fantasy points to opposing tight ends this year. And then you also look at what other tight end do they have on the roster. They have Cameron Brate. Well, the difference between Cameron Brate and O.J. Howard is Cameron Brate cannot block at all. So it would seem that they would now leave Gronk in even more to block because he's so good at it. So unfortunately, I wouldn't lean that direction unless I ultimately had to.
On the other side of the ball, we have the Chicago Bears, and I don't know if there's much to talk about outside of Allen Robinson and David Montgomery here, Johnny. So I guess that's where I'll start. Can you trust anyone out of this offense? I love what Robinson's been able to do with Nick Foles in the offense, but how are you seeing this offense break down? And talk to us a little bit about it.
I mean, you nailed it, Travis. Other than David Montgomery, and that's even an if this week, you're going to probably have to start him as a flex, most likely on most teams. But Tampa Bay just giving up 16.6 fantasy points to running backs. David Montgomery is seeing the bulk of those carries, though, 85% of the running back snaps. So you like that. So he's a nice flex to an RB2 upside this week against Tampa Bay. But on the wide receiver front, Travis, Allen Robinson is the only guy I'm trusting here. 82% snap percentage. Saw 10 targets in week 4, and Tampa Bay is giving up 21.8 fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So you do like that. There are some points to be had there. But Anthony Miller saw only 5 targets this past week, and Darnell Mooney, he did see 9 targets, but they're a little untrustworthy. I don't mind him as like a stash. I love him as like one of those Thursday stashes, that we talk about. You put him on your bench. You just see what he does. You don't actually play him, but you see what he does, see if he pops off again, and maybe you beat the waiver wire rush for him because you do like the 9 targets. But again, I wouldn't put him in your lineup this week, Travis.
What would be your advice for those rostering David Montgomery? Are you going to go ahead and try and trade him, or do you think you can hold him? What are you thinking here? I mean, he's had 13, 16, 14 carries, then saw his lowest carries with 10 last week. How are you feeling rest of season on David Montgomery?
Well, I would say at least hold them through next week because they play the Carolina Panthers, and that is the worst run defense. So, don't tell that to Kenyon Drake because he wouldn't know the difference. But the Carolina Panthers, he should be in a blow-up spot there. So if you are concerned about David Montgomery, you might look to sell after next week because then he gets the LA Rams and then the New Orleans Saints after that, and those are 2 difficult run games there. So I wouldn't mind selling high on David Montgomery after next week if you can.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Whisperers podcast. You can hear more from John and Travis on Google Play, SoundCloud, and iTunes. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at TF Whisperers.